At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Hey folks, this is Dr. Doug with Dr. Doug Radio. Thanks for joining us today. And today I have a lovely lady on the line with us, Brenda Angle. How are you, Brenda?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Doug.
Good. We've had fun getting this thing all put together, so that's been good. Anyway, Brenda, you're a life coach, but you are a faith-based life coach. I'd love for you to explain to the audience what that means.
Well, as I started helping people in life coaching after I got certified, I started noticing that when I taught a truth or brought them back to a true principle or a faith principle or to God, that I saw some real changes that stuck. And they would come back to me and say, you know, when you taught me that, it changed my life. And I haven't ever gone back. And so I started watching that. And so I started doing it more and more. And just has been a really interesting journey and fulfilling. And so I train coaches now, and I train all faith-based coaches. And we all are finding the same thing, that when we add that element of faith in there, it takes us out of a world that's me, about me, what I want in my life, but it couples us with a bigger purpose and a better mission, our mission that we're here to do on this earth.
So does that mean that the main group of people that you work with have some type of background in some faith, whatever it happens to be?
Yes. That's who's drawn to this. I mean, there's plenty of life coaching certifications out there that don't do that others can go to, but if they particularly feel drawn to this, it's been an answer to what they were searching for, yes.
That makes sense, because as I've interviewed others, that do some type of life coaching or energy, whatever it is, oftentimes they refer to the universe. The universe did this, universe did that. And I respect that, because with that comes the sense that they're really trying to avoid the faith-based. But here you are specifically saying, you know what? I'm faith-based, and so I'm going to work with people who have that as a background, and I think that's incredible.
Yeah, the universe is great, and I like that people acknowledge a higher power. But for those that want to acknowledge a God and specifically say that, then this is more what we do.
So how did you come about doing this? I mean, I'd love to hear the story about how you were led to actually doing this.
Well, I've always just been drawn to helping people, and I've gone to Africa and coached kids in schools there, and we can talk about God there. They love God, and I can talk to them about God. And what I love the most is helping the young men value women, which is not a part of their culture. And so as I did that, and I started realizing that I could talk to them about God and that God wants them to treat women with value. And just see these kids who have been, the traditions of their fathers have been passed down on their views of women, and just to see that change. I just went back again for the third time a couple months ago, and I asked these boys, I had hundreds of boys gathered that I had taught, and I just said, what is your responsibility to women? And they just all put their fists in the air, and they said, we are the protectors of women. And they just all shouted it. And I just started crying, because it's like they know that that's what God wants them to do. So there was that. I've been to the United Nations several times lobbying for family and women, and having experiences there of just a broader perspective of what we're doing here, and the value of women and how important we are and how powerful we can be. And being a mother of many children and grandchildren, and just my experience in life with people, it's brought me about to help people find their purpose and feel good about themselves, know who they are, and know that they're loved by a God. And so this process has just brought me here.
Okay, and so really you've kind of found your purpose. And
I have.
That's
Absolutely.
Really in your own unique way. And I think that's what's so important is I think everyone, when they really start to seek out and discover what their purpose is, my gut feeling is that in many cases there's some relationship to being able to help others and to touch other lives.
That's
and,
right.
and in your case, you're doing it in a unique way because you're dealing with people in a faith-based way, but also as you tell me the stories about going over to Africa and doing some of these other things, my goodness, you personally are making a difference in the lives of many people.
Absolutely. And it's just going to get bigger from here. It's just my passion and my heart, and it's just kind of why I'm here. It's my purpose.
So what do you find as you're dealing with your clients and with others? What do you find is one of the biggest points that they need to deal with, that they're struggling with, that seems to cause them not to really enjoy the life that they're supposed to be enjoying and experiencing potentially the love that they should be experiencing, mainly from themselves, for themselves, as well as from others and from God?
There's a couple of things there. I think foundationally, it's that we need to come to know who we really are, that we are loved and that we have a purpose. And a lot of people come to me and they don't know what their purpose is. They don't know why they're here. And even for me to suggest that they are loved by a God and that he cares about them and he will help them in this journey just shifts people instantly. And we have to work on that and continually work on it. Another principle that goes along with that is to teach them to let them know that they can ask for help. And so a couple of people that I coached this week, they weren't necessarily faith-based, but they had some really big struggles. And so I said, I don't know what your religious views are, but would you considering praying to God and asking him for help? Because that's going to make my job a lot easier, and I know he'll help you. And they both just broke down crying because instinctively they could feel that was true, and to come outside that and think, wow, if I have somebody helping me with this already, it feels lighter. And so no matter where they're coming from or where they're at, I just think that foundation, that we are loved and that there is a purpose for us, and we can ask for help. And my story that I share all the time, I have to share it because I've told it to thousands of people. There's a good man that I love. He's a good man, but he sat down to dinner one night, and all they had to eat was bread and milk. They were very poor. And he had company and he felt bad. And so he said grace or prayer on this food and thanked the Lord for it. And he said, give us something better. And a few minutes later, there was a knock at the door, and a man had a ham that was hot out of his oven and said, we thought you might like this for your dinner. So just the fact that he asked for it, and I will ask big groups of people, I'll say, do you think he would have gotten that ham if he hadn't asked for it? And they're like, well, maybe, because it was already on its way and it was hot. And I'm like, no, he wouldn't have. He wouldn't have gotten it. God always knew he was going to ask. So the ham came because he asked. And so to teach people that they can ask for help or they can ask for things, it's just, and knowing that there's a place to go to do that, really powerful. So I love that. And that's kind of like the crux of what I teach comes from that story. So
okay, can I play the devil's advocate for a minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So there are a lot of people out there. First of all, I think it's important to differentiate that faith-based is not necessarily religious-based, one religion or another.
No.
This is strictly, do you have a faith and belief in God?
Yes.
Okay, so devil's advocate, we got to get him in here somehow.
Okay.
All right, so the story that you just shared, how many people have you met and worked with that pray for something and it doesn't happen?
Lots of people.
Okay, so when you tell those stories about, I prayed for it and here's the ham, oftentimes, I'm listening to that and going, okay, so wow, this is going to work. So I pray and it doesn't happen. And all of a sudden, I'm going to start losing faith in prayer because it doesn't happen. So when you have lots of people that you work with that have that experience, how do you help them and what do you explain to them?
I would say most of the people that I talk to have felt like that they've been praying and asking for something for a long period of time and not feeling like that prayer was answered, or they're not getting that ham. And that's where the test comes in. Like, that's what's the true test of who we are, what we do with that. Do we stay in there and keep trying? Do we give up and we check out and say, this isn't working for me, I'm done? Or do we hang in there? And in that process of hanging in there and maybe we need to do what we're doing longer. Maybe we haven't done it long enough. But I love to ask people, what's something good that came from this process of waiting? And if I can get them to focus on that, all of a sudden it changes that up. So it's my favorite thing to do is, asking. I have one that just comes to mind is a young man that had so much anxiety. He felt like he couldn't go on and have a productive life, and he had prayed and prayed for this to be taken from him, and it wasn't. So I just said, what's something good that's come from the anxiety? And he said, nothing. There is nothing good about this. And I said, oh, well, let's say that you're talking to another young man who has anxiety, and he's completely disabled. He's paralyzed. He can't move on. And this young man, I should have said that I was coaching, actually had made some progression in his life, but he still felt paralyzed by the anxiety. Right. And so I said, what if you met someone that was in the same situation that you were in the last few years of your life? And he just sat up in his chair, and he's like, his eyes got big, and he goes, I could help him. And I said, well, there you go. That's something good that's come from this. And so maybe this long period of waiting was teaching us something, teaching us patience, empathy for other people that go through, I hear horrendous stories and hard things that want to just, bring you to tears, but we can always find something good about it, and we can find something that's made them stronger and better. And isn't that why we're here, is just to progress and become better people without that opposition, without that friction in our life that just pushes us and tries us and keeps us wondering. Without that, we would be just humdrum. Like the strength, the good comes from that friction. So I love helping change that around. And I've had plenty of friction in my life. I've had plenty of hard things, so I have that empathy. The thing that I prayed for the very longest, for many years, 38 years to be exact, didn't happen. But as I look back on that, I see that God came to my rescue. And what I was asking for wasn't really the best thing for me. And he literally came to my rescue. And so had he answered that in there, and this also has to do with others' agency. It's not just my agency, it's others that are involved that are also in there. And that makes it a little more complicated in the Lord answering our prayers. So so it doesn't always get answered right away. You're not going to automatically have a ham at your door, number one. Number two, and I think what you're saying is that as you're going through that, sometimes it's a matter of reframing your experience as to what good is coming out of this. And I think, you didn't use the word gratitude, but I suspect that comes into it. What can I be grateful for here? And all of a sudden, as you start to look at that type of thing, you can recognize, well, wow, as that young man, I actually have now had enough experience that if someone else comes to me in the same situation, I can help them a little bit. Is that basically what you're saying? Basically, that's it. And this young man at the end, I just said, so is there anything there that you can be grateful for? And he said, this changed my whole way of seeing this anxiety. He said, I can now look at it as, with some gratitude, because I want to help people because I know how they feel. Just changed him. I mean, just tears coming down his eyes, and he had hope. He had a whole different vision of what he had experienced, where before he said, there is nothing good about this. And so just changing that mindset, I believe it's just backing up and seeing it with a little broader perspective, because when we're right in that hole looking at it, it is hard to see anything good about it. But
okay,
coach, I like to do that.
Another question. I'm going to play the devil's advocate.
Okay, go ahead.
As you're saying this, and one thing that comes to my mind, because I've heard a lot of people that are very faith-based just basically say, you know what, here's a situation, God will take care of it for me. God's going to take care of this for me. And they sit back and do nothing.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to understand your perspective on the relationship between, first of all, recognizing the situation, taking responsibility for the situation, asking for help, whether it be from others or from God, and then taking the initiative to do something about it themselves.
When I'm talking to someone like that, I'll say, so tell me how that's working for you. Just praying and asking for some help to come in, but not doing anything. It's not working for you. And so taking responsibility is one of the deepest beliefs I have even in adversity and hard things, is that if there's even a sliver of truth in what's happening, we need to look at and take on and work through. Forgive is big, repent is big. Then that sets us free, and it really helps. So that's probably one of the top 5 things that I work on, is actually helping people take responsibility. Because if people, let's say they'll cut their parents out of their life or walk away from, whether it's religion or wherever, because they've been offended, if they can step back and look inside and say, is there something that I can take responsibility for? My own pain usually is what it is. It's my own pain that's causing me to cut people out of my life or to distance myself from others, and wanting it to be fixed, and it's not getting fixed. So when I look at my own self, take responsibility, it immediately just shifts us into another place. Instead of focusing out on someone else to fix this, or, mad at God because he hasn't fixed it, it's like, I need to do something. I need to change something inside myself. It's really powerful. Responsibility is huge.
Okay, and so it's easy to blame external forces. It's always easy to blame external forces. And so what you're saying, really, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that, first of all, is recognize that whatever we're experiencing in life really comes from inside.
That's right.
And so that brings up an interesting question, because I know as I visited with various people and as I've studied different modalities, one of the things that has come up, particularly as I work with business owners, and the mindset, and I realize that, that mindset makes all of the difference. But that mindset has been developed over years, and oftentimes goes all the way back to childhood. So
absolutely.
How does someone, first of all, say, okay, I recognize it's easy to say, okay, it's internal. Everything that I'm experiencing is internal, and I'm seeing what I expect to see based on my internal belief system. But how do you help people to literally not bypass, but actually start to do that deep introspective work that sometimes can be very difficult, and identify what are those patterns, what are those beliefs that are literally causing the outcomes that they're experiencing, and how do they change that so that the outcomes that they're experiencing are the outcomes that they truly want and are praying for. It's easy to pray for something and then turn around, and because of those limiting beliefs, do something exactly opposite and absolutely shoot yourself in the foot because of that.
Well, those are great questions. So I think a lot of times people don't realize where it's coming from. So a good example this week, I had a man call me and just say, you know what, my 16-year-old son is just triggering me. Like, we can get in the car and he's doing something that's just triggering. I'm just like, he is just annoying. I don't know what's wrong. I don't want to be this way, but I don't know why. And I said, well, tell me about yourself when you were 16. How was your life? And he said, that was the worst time of my life. He said, it was horrible. He said, I had to try and I ran away from home. It was a horrible time. And I said, exactly. I said, when you see your son, it's bringing up all that pain that's inside you, and it's bringing up your 16-year-old. And so it is about us. Those buttons, I'll have people call me and say, oh, my kid's just pushing my buttons, or my mom's pushing my buttons. It's like, okay, well, it's your button. So let's talk about your button. And it's you. And they're surprised because they want to trash the other person or take them out. And it's like, no, someone else would be okay with this because they don't have that button. So it's about me. And if I don't fix this and look at it, then it's going to get pushed by other people in my life. And so those do come from early childhood. Often our very early years have been impress upon us so many fears, and that's where we get a lot of our buttons. That's where we get a lot of our beliefs. And so just understanding that is powerful, but that there again, it's the desire. I believe that if someone has a desire to figure that out and get through it, that when the student's ready, a teacher's going to be provided, and they're going to be able to do that. Some of that goes more into therapy, where a therapist would take them through that and do that. Just this dad telling him that the struggle with his son was him, he just became so humble, and he just said, "Thank you for telling me that." He said, "I have a lot to think about," and he said, "I think what you just told me was true." And he said, "I think it just changed his life. I think that he will look at himself and take responsibility for it rather than being hard on his son now." So just knowing that helped. If he needs extra help with it, I'm sure we'll have some discussions with it, with some things that he can do. I teach thoughts, and that stress, anxiety hit when he sees his son in the car that's upsetting him. It started with a thought that came from his past. But those thoughts, we have like 67,000 thoughts a day in our conscious mind. And probably in the average person in the world, about 60% of those are negative. And they're going to come from, if you believe in a God, you'll probably believe in a negative force as well. And from our childhood, the thoughts come from our parents, our teachers. Those things have a huge impact on us. And so they can be coming for recall. And so we have all these thoughts going through there. And when we can learn that to manage those thoughts and to take responsibility for them, like either saying, "I don't accept that. I don't accept that thought, even though it's from my past, even if it's from my mother who constantly told me I wasn't good enough or whatever it was. I'm not accepting that." And then replacing it with positive thoughts that are sustaining myself, that are building myself. I just think this is a battleground right here, and depression happens here. It's thoughts of the past and regrets and all that, and anxiety and stress, our future thoughts but it's all that is happening here.
Okay, and I'm going to stop you because there's a lot of people that are listening to this as a podcast. So when you say here, and folks, we are videotaping this also, so you can watch this on Facebook.
I'm being real dramatic.
When you say
with my
here,
hand.
you're going around your head. So
yeah.
So really, though, you're saying something interesting, and what comes to my mind is you talk about thoughts. I often consider that imprints. Where something has been imprinted. I mean, let's think about this. When we're born as a little baby, we're probably as pure and as clear as we will ever be in our lives, even though we can't necessarily talk right then. And yet, as we start to grow, all of a sudden, we are imprinted. There's outside forces, whether it's parents, whether it's friends, whether it's teachers, that whole process, we are imprinted. And those imprints then create those thoughts, which create our behavior, which creates the outcome that we experience.
That's absolutely correct, yes.
Okay, so
you want a couple of examples of those?
I would, and then I want to talk about, once you've given the examples, what I'd like you to do is kind of share, two things come to my mind. Number one, can they handle this on their own? Or is there value in seeking out a second party, someone, ideally professional, such as yourself, or if necessary, going to the therapist, psychologist, to have someone take them through that process to be able to remove some of these things? So first of all, the examples, and then if you can answer that question.
So just one example, when we're really small, you see a little 2-year-old that's just exploring their world. They've never been here before, and they're exploring. So they see these little holes in the wall that they're electric sockets, so they have a knife or a fork, and they want to go poke it in those holes. What happens is they get their hands slapped or they get yelled at. And they weren't trying to be bad. They were just exploring, but they're in trouble all of a sudden. And so it's like, oh, something's wrong with me. I'm bad. And so that happens over, hundreds of times. And you start to find out, you start to think the imprinting is I'm not good enough, and you go to school and the teacher puts a C on your paper when you're thinking it was an A. And so everyone's putting this on you that you're not good enough. And then there's the positive side that happens as well. But these are the things that show up to try to pull us down later. And so, I had another example of, another one would be parents, like the kids come and say, hey, can we go to Disneyland, or can we do this or that? And the parent says, no, we don't have money. So that imprinting of no, we don't have money is so profoundly impressed on them, especially if they hear it over and over again. And so
Yes.
if a parent were to say, we have money, but we're choosing not to spend it on Disneyland, that would have a completely different effect on that imprinting, right?
Absolutely.
And so there you go. So then we grow up with this, we don't have money. And so I like to help as adults, I try to help them change that imprinting. Like I'll send them out to a big patch of grass or a park and have them just, count grass for 30 minutes, blades of grass, 30 minutes, and then look and see how much more there is. Just that scarcity mode that we'll grow up in because, this is my last dollar, or we don't have money, or whatever it is, to open their brain up to there's more. And that can go back to God as well, that he's got a lot of real estate and he's got a lot of blessings to give us. But so that's a couple examples, and there's millions of those. But as far as do we need someone to help us, it's really interesting because I have about 60 coaches, and when I talk to them, they coach me, and I seek coaches, and I seek help. I can see other people's struggles way more than I can see my own. And so when it's about me, I don't see it the same, and I need help seeing that. I need someone to help me with that. There was a doctor of psychology who said, everybody needs a coach. We all need, whether it's a therapist or coach or whatever, we all need someone to help us move forward. And those are mentors. And I love to have people look over their life and just look at the mentors that have been put in their place that have taken them to the next level. And I've had amazing mentors in my life that just, when you ask me how I got to this, it would not have happened without my mentors.
Okay, and in many cases, those are just gifts. Those are angels that have come into our lives that are mentors and have really helped us. Oftentimes, we have to be careful because sometimes those, quote, mentors may be giving us bad advice, so we really have to be careful with that. But I think the other point that is important is that, yes, you need somebody. And I think many times I'm guilty of this, how much can I do myself, because I recognize that I've studied a lot, I've researched this out a tremendous amount, and yet how much can I do on my own versus will it help when I contact someone who I know is professional at what they're doing, that can say, all right, Doug, let's help you to get through this, and let's look at this from a different perspective. So I think for the people that are listening out there, if they get to the point where they're not accomplishing what they want to accomplish on their own, would you suggest that it's time to call a coach?
Yeah, I absolutely do. There's a measure of humility that happens when we ask for help. And if I'm like, I can do this myself and I can take it myself, there's a little element of pride there, because if I have to actually ask, would you help me? You're already in a teachable place because you just kind of became into a more humble state, and that's teachable. And so we want to be teachable, and there's that a mindset that I don't want something to be wrong with me. I don't want to be like I'm not good enough because of all those things that have happened in our life, that we don't want to go back to that pain of feeling like we weren't good enough when we got our hands slapped for sticking the fork in the socket. But it's really that's really just a sabotage on our life. Really seeking help is very healthy, and the most successful companies and people in the world have coaches. And it's a positive thing. It's I was watching a little 8-year-old kid play as I was coaching him, and his he was having trouble with his friends, and I could tell he had some real trauma in his life somewhere. And so I was kind of watching him, and his friend said, "What's that lady? What is she doing?" And he goes, "She's my life coach." And the other little boy says, well, I want one of those. So it's like, that's from a child. We should be like that more as an adult, I think. But that was pretty cool to see. He was very proud of that. So
well, and you brought up parenting, and I think that's worth talking about for a minute, because obviously, probably the most difficult job that anyone has if they take it on is being a parent.
Oh, yes.
And there can be a lot of happiness and joy and feeling of accomplishment with that, but there can be a lot of guilt and sorrow considering, wow, was I a good parent? Did I cause this? Did I cause that? As we talk about imprints, what are some of the things that you suggest to parents relative to how do they imprint their children? Well, first of all, maybe not imprint their kids at all, let their kids really learn and so on and so forth. But how do they make sure that they're not imprinting those negative aspects in their lives with words that they say, actions that they take, that could ultimately down the road have a real deleterious effect on their children's lives and the outcome of what they're trying to accomplish? Well,
it's a great question, and there's a lot of joy and pain that comes in family. You get both of those in there.
Yes.
And I've been known to tell some of my children that opposition in life is good, and you can just thank me because I gave you a lot of it. so look at it as something good, because I like it through all my mistakes have done that. It's hard to look back and see that we could have done things different. I think a lot of parents, not all, but a lot of parents do the best they can with what they have. And we have children before we've got it all together. Not that we even will in this life perfectly, but they are there giving us a gift as well. My children have given me a gift because they've taught me and helped me to become a better parent. And so forgiveness becomes a great freeing power on both sides, that if they can learn to forgive what they were raised with, and I can forgive myself for what I did, and say I'm sorry, and that helps set each other free. Even though we can't go take away that imprinting, I've seen people shift, and that's what a good faith-based principle is, just saying that you're sorry and changing it up. There's so much power in a person changing, even though I can't go back and fix everything with them. But if I can model something different, like self-respect that I passed on to them, that I didn't respect myself enough, if I can do that now and pass that on, we're still on that line of traveling through and becoming. And so I can still do that. And then I'm going to want to pray for help that God will magnify my efforts, because my efforts are piddly compared to what needs to happen. But will you magnify them? Because my heart's good. I love, I care. I am sorry. Would you help this break those false traditions that were passed down? Because we don't want them to carry down. And sometimes they did before we got it all right and fixed it in ourselves. So that's the beauty of the plan, but they have a path as well. If you think about your childhood and your opposition, like, I don't regret mine. I had some hard things, but did that bring me to who I am? Yes. And theirs can bring them to who they are as well. So I don't like to get caught up in how heavy it is, because it can be. Like, I see kids who were molested by their stepdad, and just on and on, that what that did was so traumatic. But this little gal that just had this, she said, I said, what do you want to do with your life? Because the counselors were telling her that she was broken and the rest of her life was just really ugly. And I said, well, what do you want? And she said, you know what? I just want to go be a child advocate attorney and just help kids in this situation. And I just want to make something good out of this mess. And I go, exactly. So let's do that. Let's take what you've had and let's go do something good with it. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my approach.
It does, and you bring up the word forgiveness a lot. And it's one thing to forgive others, whether we forgive our kids or they forgive us. More often they should be forgiving us.
Yes, exactly.
But I think forgiving ourselves. is something that I'm curious. How do you help people to really genuinely learn to forgive themselves? Because one of the things that I think happens in a faith-based life is oftentimes they can experience a lot of guilt and shame.
Absolutely.
And in many cases, that guilt and shame is something that is affecting their lives. How do you teach people to forgive themselves and to remove that guilt and that shame from their lives?
So that's when I don't know how to work that without going into faith-based, because people will come with that, and if they don't believe in a God, if they don't believe even in a Savior who atoned for them, that took all this from us, I'm not really sure how to help them really unwind that. They can forgive themselves, but who did they give it to? Where did they go? And so that's why I just feel like that if I'm going to forgive myself, I become grateful for a God who's willing to forgive me and to take that from me. And then I can let go of it. So really bringing them back to that baseline of who am I, and am I loved, and is there someone who cared for me, made up for the things that I did wrong? Then I have an outlet. Otherwise, I really struggle with that, and I would love if someone else has figured out how to make that really work without a God, because that's the only place I know to go.
It takes some type of higher power. It takes a belief in a higher power of some sort for that to occur, doesn't it?
Because I myself am not good enough. Like, I am not good enough. I make mistakes all the time. I made a lot of mistakes with my children. I have a couple of children who haven't, who don't at this time let me in their life. And it's like, it is really painful and hard to do that. But knowing that the bigger picture is that they're on their path and I'm on my path, and I need to repent for whatever I did that caused pain in there. And I also want to not take responsibility that isn't mine to take. Because remember, we all get to choose. No one makes me happy. No one makes me sad. No one pushes my buttons. No one does any of that to me. I get to choose how I see my experiences and what I do with them. And choosing to forgive someone or not, that's up to me. It's not what they did wrong. It's what I choose to let go of. And so just separating that out and letting people be where they are has been a huge learning process for me as well. And I don't need to take on more than that's mine, but I need to take on what was mine and let that go. But too often, especially women and mothers, will take on everybody's everything, and it's really hard to let go of that. So if we can learn to separate that out, not be codependent and let other people's choices affect how I feel about myself, not let their opinions or ideas or even their belief on what happened to them affect my relationship to God or my relationship with myself, and knowing who I am, that's really powerful. So when we get codependent with people, we get really trapped in the heaviness of shame and not feeling good enough about ourselves. And I have absolutely been there. So. And
there is a big difference between a codependency and having a mentor in your life that is helping you work through some of these things. And I think that's really important to differentiate
absolutely
for people. So you're training a lot of other people to do this.
Yes, so exciting. I love it.
And that's another, it's interesting. It's just like the butterfly effect. You're out there going all over the world, literally touching lives. And now you're training other people to do the same thing. And all of a sudden, there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, more lives being affected, not by you specifically, but ultimately because of what you're doing.
That's my hope and dream, and I love watching and hearing the stories. And I've got coaches that are writing books and holding seminars and just taking this forward, and it just warms my heart. There's nothing more thrilling than to be a mother and fulfilling that part of my mission. But this has been a great gift. So.
Okay, and I think there's a big point there, and that is that we never know if we're out there and if we can somehow touch life, whether it's a smile or an arm around someone or a compliment or whatever that happens to be, we never know where that's going to take that person, who they're going to touch lives.
Exactly
and
right.
so I think it's so valuable to just recognize that we're here to just really love others and to lift them up in any way that we can, and recognize that sometimes if we feel like we need that help, we can reach out and find someone that'll be willing to help us.
And I believe it helps the other person, but it also it saves me, and it helps me. And when you brought up the smile, I just thought of one of the number one things that I always give an assignment out as a coach, and the number one thing is to smile. And I just had a gal call me this week and we couldn't talk. I said, well, this week before we talk, I want you to smile all week, because I know it's going to change your brain. I know it's going to put dopamine in her brain. I know it's going to help prepare her, and it's going to help others around her as well. And I was coaching a girl, helping a girl who told me that because she was smiling at school — I love to have kids just go to school and smile and say hi to people and watch what it does for their life — but she went to school and she just saw this kid approaching her, and he was a kid nobody talked to, nobody liked, and just kind of an odd duck. And she kind of had the impression to say hi and smile at him. And she said, no, I don't want him to like me. But she kind of felt the impression again. And so she did smile and say hi, and they got to be good friends. Well, a year later, she told me that he finally confessed to her that he was going to kill himself. He had set up everything to kill himself the night before, and he told God, he said, I don't know if you're there, but if you are and nobody acknowledges me tomorrow, I'm going to kill myself. And so just that smile, like, it's so powerful. So yes, I think that's one of the number one things that we can do. And then just look every day for something to be grateful for. And if you believe in a God, acknowledge it and be grateful to him. But just to look for something that came your way that you could be grateful for, it totally changes our brain. It lights up our brain. Mayo Clinic has a picture of the brain has gratitude, that just has light in it. And they said, we don't know what the light is, but we know it's there. And so just acknowledging gratitude just changes us. So powerful. So those are a couple that I love to encourage people to do.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being on the show today. This has been great. If people want to reach out to you specifically, how would they do that?
They can go to my website, or they can call me. I have Faith-Based Life Coaching Academy is faithbasedlifecoachingacademy.com is the website, and it has a lot of my coaches on there, so you can click on them and find a great coach. They're all amazing people. Some of the best people on the earth are on that, and so we're on there. It's good, and lots of great people ready to help. So
well, fantastic. And folks, hey, thanks for listening. I hope this has touched some of your hearts today in recognizing that you know what, we can make a difference in people's lives, and sometimes it helps to be that person that can be a mentor to someone else, or we can reach out to get some help, such as with Brenda. So thanks for listening. Please join us on our next show, and meanwhile, have a wonderful week and inspire some people. And Brenda, thanks again.
Thank you. And everybody just smile all week. Change your life.
Okay.